Oh, we're live.
And we're live. We were both just laughing because we weren't sure when we were going to be set live. But hi, everyone. I am so beyond excited to be here today with Gesche Haas. She is the founder and CEO and community leader in chief of Dreamers and Doers, and somebody that all of us at 10th House and Female Founder Collective look up to. In fact, all of the community leaders I know in every industry look up to Gesche for all that she's achieved, with so much empathy and so much love and so much passion. So thank you for being here. Before we get into Gesche and her myriad of accomplishments, I wanted to quickly touch on the 10th House by Female Founder Collective. This is part of a series of LinkedIn Live that we do for a private community that Female Founder Collective has launched called the 10th House. The 10th House is our way of supporting women in an even deeper fashion from Female Founder Collective by giving them tools and resources and education, access to investors, access to incredible marketing leaders and experts. The list goes on and on. We also have negotiated some really great benefits from a bunch of different companies, ranging from Squarespace to JustWorks to HubSpot. The list is also far and wide, so definitely come check those out. And I think most of all, our value proposition is in our community. So you can find people by industry, by stage, by region, so that when you are feeling alone or you have a big challenge that you can't seem to solve, you can actually reach out and find somebody that is in a similar position, has like-minded goals, and help get them answered. So definitely check out 10th House. But super excited to be here with the community creator herself, Gesche. I wanted to read some of her many accomplishments before we dive in, just to give you guys a sense of how incredible she is. But she founded Dreamers and Doers. And what year was that, Gesche?
2014.
In 2014. And you now have how many global members?
So we have two parts. We have our entrepreneurial ecosystem, and we have about 35,000 women on our jobs platform. And then in our private collective, it's maybe 750 roughly.
Wow. So really big numbers there. She expands far and wide, but she's also had her views published in many places, from Bloomberg TV to CNN Money, Refinery 29. There's my Slack. Sorry about that, guys. You're going to hear it throughout. United Nations. If you actually look on her website, she is pictured next to Hillary Clinton. So she's had a really big impact. And prior to founding Dreamers and Doers, she held senior positions in venture-backed startups. So she is no stranger to the startup space and what it takes to succeed in strategy, finance, business operations, business development. And she also spent 5 years as an investor at a healthcare-focused hedge fund. So she has had many careers as well, but she counts herself as an investor, an advisor, a founder, a mentor, all of the above. So thank you so much for being here, Gesche. And I want to start off by saying, of course, Dreamers and Doers is a true unicorn, in the sense that it's the ultimate community. Every single incredible professional I know knows of it, has been part of it, and it's been transformational for their lives and their careers. So thank you. Tell us how you started it and sort of what that first sort of impetus was for creating it.
Yes, and first, I'm just so honored to be here and finally get to connect. This is actually unbelievably the first time that we're officially connecting in such a special way. Yes. And I also have to add, as someone who's been doing community for a long time, the 10th House is truly phenomenal. I've been telling so many people about it. Like, it's done so well, and you can just really tell, because as a community leader, you know how much goes on behind the scenes, and it's done like so thoughtful. So it's just like so beautiful to watch. And yes, I just have to add that. How did Dreamers and Doers start? I get asked that question, and sometimes even in the context of like, oh, it's such a great idea. How did you come up with this idea? And the truth is that the idea found me and not me finding the idea. So it was a very happy accident. after having been an investor for half a decade and working at venture-backed startups, even after having that background, nothing prepares you for going out on your own. So when I found myself in the shoes of starting my own company, I realized I lacked a support network. A lot of my friends and family, they didn't have a background in entrepreneurship. So they were just asking me like, why aren't you going back to finance? Why are you, just working at home and trying to go out on your own? They just couldn't relate. And when you have existential fears, you're doing so many things for the first time, like that's just part of the terrain. And so very organically built a network around myself. And it wasn't even supposed to be female focused, but very organically also that happened. And the reason for that was that I had a harder time finding other women entrepreneurs. And then when I did connect with men entrepreneurs, who I, by the way, have so many amazing male peers, but they oftentimes couldn't relate to some of the issues I was facing. So that was also a very organic transition. And for the first year, there were a few people who said, like, why don't you make this your full-time business? And I was like, no way, this isn't a business. This is a community, I said at that time. And a year into it, it had taken off so much where I was put in a position where I either had to go all in or stop working on it. And then seeing the impact it was having, I could not go all in. So that's where it started over 7 years ago.
Curious, and this wasn't one of my questions, but you bring it up because so many founders go through this, and so many people who have side hustles go through this, where they're like, what is that point where I know it's time to go all in or not, right? Or like close up shop on that extra thing because my attention needs to go towards my full-time job. Do you have were there any sort of periods where you're like, I know now this is time?
I think it's a healthy mix with rational thinking and just going with your gut, and probably going a little bit more with your gut. I generally recommend trying to keep your main hustle slightly longer if you're in that position. And the reason for that is that sometimes there's too much pressure in the early days. If you don't have any income and you're in the idea stage, you will not make the best decisions, or you're forced to stop working on it for reasons other than viability. So I generally think trying to fund it as long as you can, and then you'll just know when it's not feasible. And there's never a perfect time. Like some people do it quote unquote too early, too late. There's like, it's not going to be perfect, but like, what's the time that feels like you need to give it all and it's proven out enough, or you have enough resources to continue not doing your main hustle.
I love that point about not doing it too early, because then you're operating from a place of fear, right? Or lack, because you're truly lacking. You need cash.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's a really good point. And then in terms of Dreamers and Doers, I want to know all about it. I want everybody to hear, what do members receive? What is the experience like? And you also mentioned something really interesting, that you don't market, right? Which is crazy and amazing, but you really lead with impact. So would love for you to talk about that as well, and how you're able to do that and have grown so much without marketing.
Yes. Super important to highlight that we all have our own superpowers and things that we lean into. And I think that's particularly tricky when it comes to, for example, women entrepreneurs or minority entrepreneurs, or you name it, because oftentimes mainstream media and just TechCrunch or whatever you name it, there's a certain way of doing things, but we are all very, very different in terms of like what will bring us success and how we define success. So we happen to not leverage traditional marketing. This works for us. It comes with its own pros and cons, right? You could argue like, oh, are we having the biggest impact possible if we're not like, going out there, and or can we also have the biggest impact possible in terms of like volume as well as like on an individual basis? And like, but for me, that's just what I am gravitated towards. So in terms of impact, we focus on the experience, and that has led to members referring other members. But obviously that caps our growth, or in terms of like, it's a very slow and steady. It goes upwards always, but it's like slow and steady. In terms of what we offer, we for one, it's the curated network. So similar to the 10th house, it's like the women that you get to meet because of the curation process. But then having a team in place that focuses on high impact resources. So doing the legwork on, in your case, for example, you do partnerships. In our case, we source the web for one, it's public opportunities, but actually vetting them and making sure, is this actually valuable, and what you have found out about it otherwise? Why is it valuable? How long will the application process take? Just giving that legwork rather than having everyone try to find these themselves and vet them. And we do that legwork. And some of them are public, some of them are like individual partnerships. So rather than corporate partners, we have maybe like organizational partners, and we heavily focus on PR opportunities. So we have a dedicated editorial team in place, and we have content partners. So that's a big thing that we do, and it has multiple reasons. One, obviously, you're more likely to be successful, and you are also more likely to believe in yourself, but also your network is more likely to believe in yourself if you have, for lack of a better word, like that external validation. But one part we also care about is the systemic impact, right? Because we want more women to succeed, but if we see more women in the media represented, we believe that more women will reach for leadership position and start companies if the narrative is changed there. So that's another factor of why we invest so heavily in PR opportunities.
Super interesting, because a lot of our founders are constantly looking for PR opportunities. And like you mentioned too, I think the other piece is that now every single CEO or professional, any executive, has to be very public about their views on many things. And it's hard to do that in addition to doing your job.
Exactly. And a full-blown PR agency, and we never aim to fully replace them, but it easily starts at an $8,000 retainer per month and a multiple month. Like, that's not feasible for most people starting out, or even like slightly further along. So we have a very agile approach that is extremely affordable.
And so what if I am a member of Dreamers and Doers? What is the process for me getting my own PR? What does that look like?
So I'll also actually take a step back also, because you mentioned the word process, and it was, I think that's one thing that people find like interesting for us is that first, in terms of slow and steady, we accept members only once a quarter. That has lots of pros and lots of cons. Like some people that, just thought we didn't accept them because it took so long for us to hear back. But so for one is the curation, like, so accepting members that we know have amazing stories to tell. And then in terms of the process, we have a few things that we do, but one is we write, we have columns that we write and then can feature members in on a certain topic. So it could be about sustainable fashion, or it could be about just more general entrepreneurship. And then a member would get featured and is able to say like, hey, I've gotten featured in NASDAQ and Business Insider, Brit & Co. Those are just like a few of our partners. So that's just a really, really efficient way of doing it. It's like literally maybe took you 5 minutes to contribute, and you have maybe a 90% chance of getting featured. Like, obviously we can't feature everyone every time, but it's super high ROI because like money obviously, but also like time is so valuable and a scarce resource. Then other things we do is like we like, for example, there's like obviously the TEDx database, but it takes a lot of work to actually skim through it and reach out to organizers. So we do a lot of like legwork, or reach out to conference organizers. So it's like a very light touch agency in some ways. But what we don't do is like, oh, we're not going to go out and try to pitch you for Oprah. Like, that would be like first of all, really hard to get, and it's just a different price point. So that's why we emphasize the agile approach, like agile on our end, but also for members, like super, super high impact.
It's hugely valuable though. Just sort of understanding what is your point of view and what's your sort of your unique brand positioning as an executive within the ecosystem. So I love that. Yes. I want to actually dig into your personal background, because as a community builder, I think it's really fascinating that you've moved around a lot. And I think that had to have somehow contributed to your ability to connect and empathize, which is empathy is a word you used a lot in sort of talking about Dreamers and Doers and your professional life. So I'd love to hear how you feel like that's impacted that ability, and how you sort of used your personal background and history to influence what you do on a day-to-day basis with Dreamers and Doers and professionally.
Yes. To give background, I was born in Africa, then moved to Germany, Malaysia, Singapore, Germany, Beijing, Hong Kong, New York, and now I live in Wyoming. And I'm also half German, half Chinese, Malaysian. So that's why Ali asked that question. The number one part, I think, is just seeing so much diversity growing up, right? Like growing up in one place, oftentimes there's like a normal. And for me, there was no normal. Like, I've seen nearly every iteration, not every, but like I've seen what's possible in terms of like how different humans can be and what everyone brings to the table. And for that reason, I just see beauty and see just like, I'm just so intrigued by people's stories. And I think that's what's what made me an accidental community builder. Community is definitely my kryptonite, and just being like having that obsession and interest in people's stories and the diversity of and think entrepreneurship specifically. Just also seeing that like rules are there to be broken, like wanting to change the status quo, right? Because I've seen so many different versions of how society and the world can look like. So I'm like, oh, so women are supposedly, get less funding, or like are, have less chances as an entrepreneur, and saying like, no, we're going to completely change that because that's possible. Not more than possible. That's like what's supposed to happen.
Well, that brings me actually to my next question in terms of sort of women and the role that we play in society, and the role that in the United States in particular, in our culture, we sort of occupy. And there's really this idea, particularly in business, of a zero-sum game. And you've notably said in the past that you don't believe in that, and that women actually create bigger pies. So can you talk a little bit about that and why you believe that, and sort of how you've seen that executed through Dreamers and Doers or elsewhere?
Yes. So I loved quoting Sheryl Sandberg and Adam Grant there. They wrote an amazing series, I think it was in the New York Times, but on women in business. And their statement was like, women help more, but benefit less. And I think we've all experienced this. Anyone who's been in the corporate world, if a man is busy, he's just busy and important. If a woman's busy, she's a, bitch. And sometimes people, or it's just right. Like more expectations put on women, and their characters are also judged more than men are. And so what we are doing and what you're doing with the 10th house is like women help more and benefit more, much, much more. I've just seen that 1 + 1 can equal 100, especially when women come together. But there's a certain infrastructure I think that needs to be in place, because sometimes 1 + 1 can equal less than 2 even. But just what happens, women are just so resourceful. And I think it's tricky too, because like oftentimes like leadership traits traditionally, that what media describes as leadership traits, are very, very masculine, right? And then we are so surprised that we, like are measured by these factors that maybe just don't come as natural. And I think it's one of many women's superpower, like unlocking this massive value by joining forces with each other. And it's funny too, because women specific, like we have a lot of women who happen to have male partners, and their male partners will, hear them talk about Dreamers and Doers all the time. And they are like, does something like that exist for men? And there is obviously like the boys
and everywhere, actually.
Right? Like everything, basically default society is your boys club. But it's like the impact is different, like in a boys club versus like something like the 10th house or Dreamers and Doers.
But I think one thing that men do really well that we can all learn from as women is they give each other business, right? They throw each other opportunities, which I think is really beautiful, and it's a wonderful, way of coexisting. And I think that's what we're sort of trying to create within 10th house, and what you've done within Dreamers and Doers is by creating a community, you are not having to do the research that it would otherwise take you years to do. And somebody else might have a business opportunity. I just had somebody reach out about needing a production agency. And so that gives a really great opportunity to throw that out into the community. And these are vetted individuals where they found it within 30 minutes, while that might have taken them a couple weeks to be able to find and vet and interview different agencies. They knew that they had a trusted resource at their fingertips. So I love that, and very much a believer in that. So I love that you were mentioning it. One thing that I do find sort of holds women back, and you've mentioned in the past that does as well, is confidence. I've seen this as an angel investor where, women will be pitching and they have the most, for lack of a better way of putting it, badass backgrounds where they've achieved so much, and really they deserved it. And they were like, I'm really lucky that I got this opportunity to work at this place and make a lot of money for this person. I'm like, you weren't lucky, like you worked really hard for that. So I'd be interested to sort of hear your thoughts about women and confidence, and how you've been able to help sort of transform that and increase their confidence through Dreamers and Doers and elsewhere.
So for one, it's what I mentioned about like the leadership, that oftentimes like, oh, this is what a badass or a successful leader looks like, and they happen to be like very masculine traits, and then we don't fit that mold. So I think that causes some of those issues. Another part is definitely socialization, in terms of like, oh, you shouldn't be bragging, and I think also just communication in some ways. Like there's this fascinating study that was done for STEM students in high school, and they essentially found out that when women are in the minority, they easily perceive their gender as a negative, as it perceives to a topic, and sometimes it even happens if it's 50-50 women and men. And I think we could talk about this for hours, but there's just something about that, and I do think there's something about like the world we live in is very male dominated, so just the default, like how an airbag is designed, how a door is designed, like everything was kind of created for like a man's world, and trying to find our way in there can be tricky. And the last thing is on, for example, even a negotiation. Like we always say like, oh, women should negotiate more when it comes to salary, but studies show that women are less likely to succeed even if they say and do exactly the same thing a man would, and a woman's more likely to be penalized for doing that. So it's just like,
wow.
Yeah, but we're obviously, all of us are changing that. And in terms of how we in Dreamers and Doers, or for myself, how I make that shift is, for me personally, trying to lean into my superpower. So rather, like sometimes I am self-conscious. I'm like, am I, growing too slow? Am I like not, like aggressive enough? And I'm just like, no, that's my superpower. Like I need to consciously think about it and own it and understand what it comes with. Like, okay, maybe we won't grow that high, but like we've grown every single quarter, so. Yeah. I'm figuring that.
You also talked about charging, right? Like that was this big moment for you. And I've heard this again and again and again from women. They're like, I feel bad asking for a higher rate, or, I don't know that I should be charging for these services. And I think a lot of times women give stuff away for free, like you were talking about at the top of the conversation. So what was that sort of moment? How did you convince yourself to get over that hurdle of actually charging for membership for Dreamers and Doers? And what did you find on the back of that when you actually started charging?
Yes. So I think it's actually in some ways coming from a good place that we feel like uncomfortable charging. I mean, it's a debate, but like, we care about others. I'm like overly generalizing, but I hacked into it by trying to understand why I felt so bad about it. And it was because I'm like, oh, I truly do genuinely want to support others, and I feel, bad charging. But then I reframed it and said, like, I am causing far more harm not charging, by me not being able to get over myself to charge, because yes, it's uncomfortable, but by me giving into that discomfort, it's much worse, because then I can't provide something that is so needed, because I'll have to stop working on it, or I can't do it to an extent that I can't let it live to its full potential. So I basically tapped into that discomfort and used that discomfort to lean me into the opposite direction. And what the result was from that is, free doesn't equal free, right? If you join, and there's fantastic free communities out there, nothing wrong with that, but that will be part of the fiber of this product and the community. So the other people, how they show up, the offerings that you have, who they're accountable for, maybe they aren't charging you, but who is paying them, or if they are doing it completely pro bono. First of all, it's maybe not fully ethical that we're, benefiting so much from someone doing something for free, but even if they are, they can only show up so much for you. So like, it's actually more costly in some cases to join a free community than it is to join a premium paid community, because of the ROI that you have.
I love that. I want to transition to motherhood, because you have 2 kiddos and you ran the business for a long time. Your oldest is 2.
Yes.
So you ran the business for a long time before they came along. So I want to talk about what that transition looked like, and hear from you what you've learned, how you feel like you're different as an executive since you gave birth to 2 beautiful children.
Thank you. I was definitely nervous going into it, obviously having never experienced this, and just being concerned of like how it would change me as a leader. But it's made me a better leader, truly. It really forced me to scale myself, because they are a limiting factor. I think everyone, especially women founders, have a hard time setting boundaries, and oftentimes with ourselves, right? Like it just creeps in, like every second we have, we just work because we care so much, and it's just like hardworking. And so that really helped, where working less doesn't mean that you have less of an impact. It's just about getting smarter. Like, how can I have the biggest impact with my time? Like the 20-80 rule. How can I scale operations systems? How can I build a team? And you just have to be more mindful with your time. And working all the time isn't the best thing for the business either. Like, taking a step back and being able to think and percolate is so important. So it's really helped me scale myself and scale my business.
So what are some of the things that you've put in place as a result of having a kid? Like, is there a certain time of day that you stop working, or do you do time blocks? Did you hire certain roles that have been just transformative in your ability to scale yourself? Can you give a little insight into like the tactical things that you've
Love
done?
it. Love tactical. So the in terms of like the hours I work are directly correlated with the when I have childcare. So it's like Monday to Friday, 8.5 hours is when I have childcare. So that's actually nice, because like before I'd always be like, I need a morning routine. I need like certain, hard stops. And that was a gift, one of the many gifts I've gotten from my children. And then I have I'm not sure if I call it a bad habit, but I always do a little extra work when they're in bed at night, which is not a good habit. So I need to like figure that out. But now I only do meetings usually on Tuesdays and Thursdays. And that's been a game changer. I think especially as a community leader or anyone who talks to a lot of people, it's important to carve that kind of time out. Beyond that, Fridays I try to do more like strategic work. So kind of trying to like mentally switch. That helps quite a bit. And this is more like of a personal hack, but when there are individuals that want to meet up with me and it's like less, like it's maybe more of like casual connection, I always try to like bring the babies with me, so that we're trying to like double, like just, and I'll also say I used to breastfeed on calls all of the time. And I think that was like so fortunate doing the work that we do. And I can't even imagine like having a regular corporate job where I have to be there in person and where it wouldn't be accepted that I'd have to cancel meetings because I have, childcare happened to not happen in a day. So that's been hugely helpful.
Yeah, I think that's why so many women start businesses. That was a big impetus too for FFC. We were seeing over 2,000 women were starting a business every single day. I think a lot of it was because of, as you become a mom or even think about it, you're like, what does my day look like? How do I have that flexibility? And I think that's the one silver lining, or one of the one silver lining from the pandemic, is that people have had that chance to work more flexibly, and corporations have seen, oh, somebody can work from home and be just as productive as when they're in the office. So I love that, though. I also had problems with boundaries until I had kids. The other thing that's really interesting about you, among many other things, but is that you work out of Jackson, Wyoming. So you've been distributed way before being distributed was a necessity. So talk to us a little bit about how you operate your team in a distributed fashion, and how you guys work through productivity and communication.
Yes. So made a very conscious decision to be fully remote. It just like helps in terms of like lifestyle and wanting kids. And I think I've learned so much with hiring, but like a few quick tips are definitely looking for someone who wants to work remote, because it isn't right for everyone, right? So you want to kind of find an environment that works, and someone who views it as a valuable asset. Then in terms of team, we really love doing team calls and making them focus. Actually, we barely talk about work, because we always talk about work during our one-on-ones and all of that. But like the team calls, like a essentially a water cooler, and because a lot of things that we do implement within our community, we try to implement within our company as well. So like one big part is like we do a lot of real talk and authentic vulnerability within our community. So we try to it doubles kind of reminding the team of like what our core values are within the community, but living and breathing it as a company and as a team as well. So then on our team calls, we'll like kind of do little matches, and our team members get to know each other on that front. And lots of just like systems. I mean, like the popular ones like Slack and yeah, we couldn't live without Asana.
With you, love Slack, and that's why you're constantly hearing it going in my background. We are almost at time. So I wanted to ask you to leave us with some last lessons of what the pandemic has taught you about running a business, as well as personal and sort of what the go forward looks like for you. And then I want you to make sure you tell everybody where to find you and how to join Dreamers and Doers, as well as support you.
Thank you so much. So COVID-19 work-wise, it's so easy to, not mind your own lane and look at like, oh, what everyone else is doing, like raising a lot of funding, and nothing wrong with raising a lot of funding, but like kind of figuring out like what is most important to you and your vision. And during COVID-19, there were so many companies, sadly, that didn't make it. And I do think a big factor was like growing too quickly, raising a lot of funding. And hindsight is always 2020, but I think just really firmly digging deep, what are your values, what you care about, and just going that path, and it will work out. So it was just a great reminder to be like, okay, a year and a half ago, like it looked like, everyone else was like the smart one going like for the crazy funding, but it'll, it's important to stick to your guns with that regard. And on a personal level, it's so cliche, but like health is so important, and it's so easy to, like work nonstop, and I still sometimes do, but at the end of the day, like the most important things are like usually in your home or in your heart, and making time for that, because like you will never ever get that back, and it also makes you a much better leader. Yeah. In terms of where you can find us, our website is dreamersdoers.com. We actually have our next cycle coming up in November, so quarterly admissions, and then I personally can be found like everywhere with just my first and my last name at Gesche Haas.
Aw, thank you. I love leaving with, the most important things are what's in your head and your heart. Amazing. Chills. Thank you so, so much for being here. It's been such a pleasure. I was delighted to get the chance to get to interview you, because I've had so many questions. And again, this woman has achieved incredible things and done amazing things for others. So thank you so much. And thank you all for being here as well. All right, signing off. Bye, everyone.